So I decided I was going to make a video of a drive motor replacement on a Bobcat T190 because when I was digging around on YouTube, I didn't find a lot of things that I deemed super in-depth or helpful. However, this turned out to be a lot more than just a drive motor replacement. There's some system diagnostics in this, there's some fabrication and pulley repair. It goes down a rabbit hole super deep. So if you're into mechanical stuff, this could be cool, this could make you cringe, it could do all of the things that fulfill your need to at least be entertained and maybe learn a thing or two so you don't replicate or go down the same path as deep as I have. However, I now have a good, reliable machine with a lot of new components. I learned a lot and was able to hone my skills. In the end of the day, this is the kind of stuff I like to do. May not make sense to some, but I find it challenging and enjoy the success and win at the end of the day. So hold on. It's a very long journey. So this motor looks like it had a little bit of rough life, some pitting and corrosion and stuff carrying on in here. Surprised it didn't come with any caps or plugs. It was rolled upside down, laying on the pallet, wrapped in plastic. But on the motor that came off the machine, it had a smaller drain hole here. It was a 3/8 ORB fitting with a JIC male adapter. We got our 3/4 inch ORB fittings here. So this is your case drain for the drive motor, and this is the brake fitting. On the old system, it had two. In the service manual for Bobcat, for this particular unit, it says that there's a brake fitting, pressure fitting, and then there's the power assist fitting. The paperwork that came with this motor says that this needs to make 300 PSI to deactivate. So the manufacturer, or the remanufacturer, the shop that overhauled these units, and it said that they did some internal changes for the brake assembly, and so based on those changes, it requires just the one power unit line. Again, these are ORB, the 3/8 ORB, 3/8 ORB, and your case drain line. So I'll show on the machine when this starts to go back together exactly where we need to hook it. You have to cap off the other line. This is an older model T190 that's being overhauled here. This is going to be my plug for the worn Pulley. If you don't have something like this, I suggest you get one. It's really good for one-man lifting, pulling, straightening, all kinds of sketchy stuff if you're working by yourself. I do have this on an engine crane, but it's nice to be able to just reach up and squeeze the trigger and just lower this thing into place. It's got variable speed control and just lift or lower wherever I want it. So yeah, get you one of these. I'm using fine thread hardware that came from McMaster-Carr, 5/8, 9 thread, grade 8s. They were cheaper than Bobcat. They were cheaper than anybody else. And fine thread, top lock, deforming lock nuts. You should see the hardware that came out of this machine. I served in eastern North Carolina. Maybe you're familiar with the Outer Banks. All the salt, all the sand. Yeah, fun stuff. So the remanufacturer did not do a great job on cleaning up around the O-ring seals. Not really pleased with that. I'm not going to mention who it is unless this whole thing goes sideways. Stuff's rags in. I cleaned it up with some emery because he had painted over the O-ring bosses but not really cleaned the dirt around the seals. I was saying he could, you know, I'm going to vacuum this out, clean it up, and go from there. The original intent of this video was not to trash talk the shop that refurbished this motor, or that this refurbished motor came from. However, more things. The threads on the hub were just all boogered. One had been cross-threaded in the past. other ones are packed full of paint and grit and just material, rust scale from him cleaning it, but not being cleaned. Just one more thing. So just buyer beware, caveat emptor if you decide to use one of the eBay refurb specials. Yeah, you get what you pay for, I guess. But even though I paid just as much for this one as I could have if I had gotten it from driveline refurb shops in the area. So, all right, so this is your brake case drain. I converted mine over to ORFS, O-ring face seal. It just seals better than the JIC stuff. These were already owned these fittings for the big stuff, and the O-ring face seals for the 3/4 inch hose were rather expensive. And I already owned the O-ring face seal crimps for the other lines, so I went with that. It seals better. So as for running the 4 line instead of the 5 line, so the 5th line, you'd have had 2 brake lines. So this is our primary line, and this was the power assist line. It's capped off. I'm just going to run the 1 line. Just got to get 300 psi to the brake assembly, and that should hopefully do it. So that's a 3/8 JIC cap. I haven't tightened this stuff down yet, and we'll see if it works. So I thought this was going to be just a motor swap. Turns out I guess I got a brake valve problem. I just tested the motor that I got from the shop rebuilt. I hooked it up to this Porta Power, put a gauge on. Gauge range is a little higher than it would want to be. I'd stole it off another piece of equipment. It should be 300, 400 psi. I got the gauge to read about 350 psi, pumped it up, fired the machine up, and motor turns free, nice and quiet. Capped off the 2 feed lines you can see down there. Better light on here. So cap those off, 3/8 JIC AN caps, and then tested it. So all good there. So now it's time to start diagnosing this brake spool valve. So I decided to check the charge pressure feeding the brake solenoid valve, and in this instance I got 0 psi. I tested it at the engine, at the service port in the back by the filter, and was getting 150 psi, which is low. However, it should have been reading something right here. So yeah, 150 psi should have been read there. Turns out there was something else going on. You're going to see later on in this video what exactly was wrong. Yeah, that gauge should be reading charge pressure, and I had nothing. But still, it's a good test because it gets testing this pressure relief valve here. And it gets to 500, but it's leaking elsewhere. But that's when it bleeds at, is 500. So, okay, that's good to know that that's not the source of the loss of charge pressure. So what started out as just a track motor replacement, a 4 line. Turns out I don't have enough charge pressure from the pump, and the track motors were dragging because the brakes weren't fully disengaging. It makes sense. So the track motor on the other side was replaced 500, 600 hours ago, and then I guess the charge pressure was enough then that it started to slowly drag and wear on that brake. But for some reason, this track motor was dragging more, or the motor was worn out as well. So it was a combination of worn out motor and not enough charge pressure. So this side started showing symptoms before the newer motor, but worn out brake. Just a series of events. So now we're pulling the pump and all, which is requires pulling the engine, which has been actually not as bad as I thought it would be. So pulling the engine, got accessories and stuff out of the way here, wire harness unplugged, the hydraulic filter guards, and anything in the way, the exhaust is removed. All that stuff came out pretty easily, luckily, knock on wood. The rear motor mounts are going to be pretty easy. They're just plates and bushings. The front ones, not so great. This one behind the reservoir tank is going to be a challenge. Since I have to take the 4 drive pump hoses, the traction hoses off, I'm going to go ahead and pull it loose from the other side. So you can't even really get to that front left motor mount bolt without removing a bunch of stuff, standing on your head, whatever. Since the traction motor, the drive motor hoses have to come off of the pump end inside, down in there on both sides, those 4 connections. I'm going to go ahead and pull them. Yeehaw. Pull them from out here as well, and that'll give me some access through this opening to pull that motor mount bolt. I was already pulling the track on this side to flip the sprockets around, and I was going to inspect this. I had to change the hub fluid, which luckily I did because that thing was pretty much dry. I didn't get hardly a splash out of it. Doesn't seem crunchy or anything down inside of there, which is good. I've got a bore scope. I'm going to look in there just to make sure. A new drive motor. Previous owner put it on at 3,800 hours. Machine's got 4,500 hours right now, so it is 200, 300 hours overdue for this oil change. So it's never been done. Timed it well, I think. I've got that synthetic oil, the Bobcat stuff. So we'll go ahead and do that as well while this project's going on. It's free. It is finally free. Thanks to Dad and Larson. Yep, he has warrants, so I can't videotape him.
I just like our design on the little...
Yeah, so this is an extension thing to pick up the, to reach in flat, because the engine crane was too big and lifted too high, and it's a weird profile, so it made a little do-flatchy and picked it up and worked pretty well. Got a lot of cleaning to do, and new pump's got to go on. Okay, we've got the engine pulled and the pump switched out. That didn't take too long, about 2 hours of cleaning and reassembling fittings. Pump came with new O-rings for all the fittings, which is great. New seal for the auxiliary or the gear pump to go on the drive pump. Looking pretty good. So get to deal with the pulley that I broke using the puller too aggressively. So nothing like creating a new project for your new project. Let's see here. So this is the pulley that I so gallantly broke. Went ahead and ground it some, cleaned it up some, threw the torch on it some, heated it up, burned off all the crap. I'm gonna try to give it some TIG welding. I got some Manel filler rod and see if we can't build this thing up and remachine it. Oh yeah, nice and ugly. But we're building it up. It's sticking. It's not cracking. See how it goes. Okay, the saga of this machine. The engine's back in, new belt. I fixed the pulley. I got some pictures of that I may have shared in this video already. I didn't take much video of that process. When you get into going into something, you go. I went ahead and changed all of the hydraulic fluid, new filters. I cut open the old filter. There was a ton of brake material in it. And what looked like to be some hose material. I changed this filter about 150 hours ago. The hoses are probably from the 709 Bobcat that I rebuilt. So put it all back together. New pump, primed the pump, overfilled it, filled the pump some, then primed everything, overfilled the reservoir, and then slowly cranked it. Luckily, the engine fuel system didn't have a chance to prime. So then finally, by the time the engine would start, I'd run it for a few seconds, shut it off, then run it for a few seconds longer, then shut it off. There's air in the system. You could see in the reservoir that it was foam, so it would stop and let that bleed down. I don't want to cause any cavitation in the brand new pump. So I hooked the pressure gauge up to the service port, and just to check when I was starting it, and I was getting 400 psi, which is concerning at the service port here, because it should only be 250 to 270 according to the service manual. So I knew something weird was going on. Then rebuilt the brake valve. It was $38 for the seal kit. Everything looked good. There wasn't anything in it. Went ahead and rebuilt it anyways. I know that the park and brake switch is working. I can lock it. It locks the left side. So the issue was, to reiterate, easy word to say, need more coffee, is that this drive motor, the new drive motor, still wouldn't move. It would not release the brake. It was weird when I parked the machine. Everything worked okay. It was just noisy and crunchy on this right side drive. So assumed to drive. Well, then that turned into not enough charge pressure reading. So that was the replacement remanufactured pump from Loader Parts Source. Super great people. I'm going to send the core back. Changed the case drain filters. Here's some pictures of those. So yeah, so the case drain filters weren't great on the left side. You could see some hose material or something. It just was a mess. So back to checking pressure at the service port with the gauge. I had a 600 psi gauge. I would try, when I locked the brake, it created 400 psi and then would bleed down while running with the brake valve locked. It's very odd. So, okay. So then I blocked off the left side motor. So I thought, okay, maybe I've got a brake seal leaking in the left side track motor. It's been remanufactured 500 hours ago. It didn't make any noise, didn't seem weird, but okay, maybe when I flipped the brake solenoid on, it was losing pressure through the left side brake seal. Okay, seems reasonable. Went to bed, didn't sleep, thought about it all night. Woke up early in the morning laying there, and I'm like, let me retrack the circuitry again and reread the diagnostics in the service manual. So one of the things I never really checked and was confused about was in my particular system here, that hose down there that goes from the bottom of the basically the loader control solenoid, ran from here and fed the solenoid, the brake solenoid. All right. I kept reading in the service manual about checking this back relief valve. So that's a back pressure valve, so check valve. Like, why in the world? And that hose was running from here to what is actually the auxiliary pressure relief valve, and then that's a case drain hose on top that goes around back to the reservoir. So I was looking at it and I'm like, why in the world are they going to have me check that check valve for the loader? So then I dug into the Bobcat online parts breakdown. It's showing a 90-degree fitting going to the test port. And even in the pictures in the service manual, there's a 90-degree fitting. That 90-degree fitting was attached to that pressure relief valve, and that short little hose was going to that solenoid, or the loader, the auxiliary relief valve. So if you get where I'm going with this, the machine I bought 450 hours ago, it came this way. I never broke that hose loose from that relief valve going to that, or from, yeah, to the loader relief valve. Why would I? That system is separate. I didn't need to dig into that based on the way the hoses were routed when I took it all apart and marked them and everything. So here's a big FU to whoever put this thing back together when that track motor went on, and based on the appearance of the brake valve, rebuilt the brake solenoid and decided to flip-flop these hoses, whether it was they just looked better that way, they were easier to put in that way. So the reason the pressure was spiking and actually killed my 600 psi gauge is the pressure was coming from the loader control valve, which is a 3500 psi circuit. I'm going to wager that I probably do have bad brake seals in the left motor, maybe. It probably explains why that case drain was so well packed full of crap, because it was receiving wrong circuit pressure. So this project turned out to be replacing both sides, both track motors. You can kind of see in here where I've got this teed off to one fitting. And it's using the number 2 pressure port, and I plugged the number 4. So. When I engage brakes, all right, so this thing's finally back together. Got about 12 hours on it now, runtime. So far, no issues. At first, when I put it back together, after both final drives, seemed like I had a track drive. Still some issues, unless I ran it at almost full throttle. After a little bit of time, it seems though that things have freed up, and it seems happier, quieter, and a little more push power. I will say though, avoid the rebuilt final drives and pumps on eBay. Just go with someone reputable. Texas Final Drive, I had good luck with them. Took a while to get it shipped. I don't know if they were just back ordered or what. I think it got left on the shipping dock, and it just took some extra time to get here. So that was a little frustrating, but otherwise the component itself was much better quality, much cleaner. The one I got from eBay, it just was bad. You looked like the guy washed it in his dishwasher, and you know, it was not the good, worth the money in comparison to what else is out there. So I hope this helps somebody figure out some issues with their T190. Still a great machine for its size. I'll be keeping it for a while though, I think, to get my return of investment.